North Korea fires another ballistic missile amid its continued non-response to inter-Korean hotline phone calls. U.S. inflation continues to cool, with consumer prices in March seeing the smallest gains in nearly 2 years. South Korea reports its 9th case of m-pox as health authorities raise the alert level for the infectious disease to caution. Good afternoon. We start with North Korea launching yet another ballistic missile this morning. This comes as the regime has not been responding to daily routine calls with South Korea for several days now, raising tensions in the Korean peninsula. Bae Eun-ji has our top story.
North Korea fired a ballistic missile on Thursday morning, prompting a brief evacuation order for residents in northern Japan. South Korea's Joint Chiefs of Staff said it detected an intermediate range or longer missile fired from near Pyongyang at about 7:23 a.m. on Thursday morning. It added the missile was launched at a high angle and flew about 1,000 kilometers before landing in the East Sea. The military said it's maintaining strong defense readiness by closely cooperating with the U.S. Soon after the launch, the Japanese government initially advised residents in the country's northern prefecture of Hokkaido to take shelter. It later lifted the measure after it believed there was no longer a possibility of the missile falling on Hokkaido or its surroundings, when the country's Coast Guard said it believed the ballistic missile had already fallen. The latest missile test comes as the North has remained unresponsive to routine calls with South Korea for about a week. The Inter-Korean Liaison Communication Channel and a military hotline are normally used twice a day, but there has been no response via either channel since last Friday. Experts have said Pyongyang's move appears to be in protest over the ongoing security cooperation between Seoul and Washington. Also, North Korea held its 6th enlarged meeting of the 8th Central Military Commission of the Workers' Party of Korea on Monday. According to North state media, during the meeting, its leader Kim Jong-un stressed the need to expand the regime's war deterrence in a more practical, offensive, and effective way. Thursday's launch came just 17 days after the regime fired a short-range ballistic missile last month. Bae Eun-ji, Arirang News.
South Korea's National Security Council has strongly condemned North Korea's firing of a ballistic missile, vying to ramp up Seoul's response to possible further provocations. The NSC on Thursday convened an emergency meeting of senior members, presided over by National Security Advisor Cho Tae-yong. According to a statement from the top office, the NSC will strengthen Seoul-Washington-Tokyo trilateral cooperation to respond to provocations while deepening trilateral intelligence sharing, including security information with Japan through GSOMIA Pact. The statement also said members expressed their anger by saying Kim Jong-un is ignoring the livelihoods of North Koreans and is focused on provocations. Now on to the latest on the reported leaks of U.S. military documents that have sparked allegations of spying on its allies, including Seoul. While the White House knows the gravity of the issue, it stressed the need for collecting information. South Korea, in the meantime, reaffirms the two nations' trust amid mounting security concerns within the nation. Shin Se-byuk has the details.
As the Pentagon document leak probe heats up, the U.S. has stated that collecting information is necessary to protect national security and that it will continue to do that to go forward. This is according to White House National Security Council spokesperson John Kirby speaking to Fox News during President Biden's trip to Northern Ireland on Wednesday. Kirby also emphasized that the U.S. is treating the leaks very seriously as it represents a breach in Washington's ability to protect sensitive information. He also noted that the U.S. is actively engaging with its allies and partners to provide them with more information about the issue. The leaked classified Pentagon documents suggested that the U.S. most likely spied on South Korea as it included sensitive conversations between top South Korean security officials. But South Korean Foreign Minister Park Jin on Wednesday dismissed the content of the documents, saying much of it is fabricated. Later the same day, during a National Assembly Foreign Affairs Committee session, he added that the U.S. had expressed its willingness to fully cooperate with South Korea, saying the two allies are taking the issue seriously. Park also said that the government would take appropriate measures if needed.
And nothing is off the table for discussion. The two countries have strong trust. Depending on the outcome, appropriate measures will be taken.
He also said the government is devising ways to reinforce security at the presidential office building. President Yoon relocated the office from the formal presidential complex at Cheongwadae to a location in central Seoul at the beginning of his tenure. Some watchers have criticized the move, saying it has made the office more vulnerable to spying attempts. 신세벽, Arirang News.
U.S. inflation continues to show signs of slowing down. Last month's consumer prices saw the smallest on-year gains in nearly 2 years. Now, what does this possibly mean for the upcoming rate decision next month? Our Lee Seung-jae takes a look.
According to the U.S. Labor Department, on Wednesday, the U.S. Consumer Price Index rose just 0.1% in March, up 5% from a year ago. The latest data marked a lower figure compared to Dow Jones's estimates of 0.2% and 5.1% respectively. However, core CPI, which excludes food and energy, rose 0.4% on month and 5.6% year on year. While the latest data shows that inflation is still far from a figure the U.S. Central Bank feels comfortable with, it's a sign that consumer prices are slowing down. But is this a signal that the U.S. Fed will start freezing its rate hikes? Minutes from the March meeting of the Federal Open Market Committee showed that despite indications that the U.S. could suffer from a mild recession in the second half of the year, it still decided to raise its rates, albeit by just 25 basis points. Some FOMC members cited the collapse of Silicon Valley Bank and the impact of the overall banking sector as the source of the mild recession to come. In fact, several Fed officials considered a rate pause in March, according to the latest minutes. While the current inflation levels are far from the target of 2%, many economists now predict the U.S. Central Bank will begin slowing down its rate hikes and potentially even freeze rates during the next policy meeting in May. With the minutes indicating that a potential U.S. recession will take 2 years to recover from, some experts expect rate cuts to happen earlier than expected, despite U.S. Fed Chair Jerome Powell previously stressing that no rate cuts will happen until after 2023. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
South Korea's export and import prices both rose for the second straight month in March due to weaker Korean won. According to the Bank of Korea on Thursday, the export price index last month came to around 117.52, up 2% from February. Chemical products and computer-related electronics led the rise, while prices for coal and petroleum products slightly dropped. Meanwhile, the country's import price index increased by 0.8% on month, with primary metal products and chemical products largely contributing to the rise. South Korea's tech sector recorded a trade surplus last month, but saw the steepest on-year fall in exports in more than 14 years. According to the Trade Ministry on Thursday, the ICT sector's trade surplus came to nearly $4 billion. The sector's exports reached $15.8 billion in March, topping the $15 billion mark for the first time since December. Tech exports were still down by 32% compared to the previous year, the sharpest on-year decline in more than 14 years, partly due to the record high figures in March 2022. ICT exports have been down on-year now for 9 straight months on the back of a slump in the semiconductor industry. Tech imports in March stood at nearly $12 billion. South Korea is seeing another extremely dusty air due to the effects of severe yellow dust blowing in from China and Mongolia. According to the Environment Ministry on Thursday, the caution alert against yellow dust was issued on Wednesday, remains in effect into Thursday. The alert is second level of the nation's 4-tier crisis alert system, issued when there is a risk of a large-scale disaster and when a fine dust advisory is issued because of yellow dust. That makes today the second straight day the entire country has been under a fine dust advisory. South Korea has reported another case of m-pox, commonly known as monkeypox. The Korea Disease Control and Prevention Agency confirmed the country's 9th case of the infectious disease on Thursday morning. The latest patient lives in Gyeonggi-do province and has no recent travel history overseas. The KDCA suspects that the patient caught the disease through close contact with those already infected. The agency also raised the alert level for m-pox to caution, the second level of its 4-level system, as 3 cases, including this one, occurred in the same week. One of the South Korean Air Force's key assets is its tanker transport, which helps refuel combat jets and deliver emergency supplies in times of need. Our defense correspondent Kim Hyun-sung went aboard this tanker plane to see it in action.
This is the very first time that the South Korean Air Force has invited reporters to fly on board this KC-330 aircraft. So as a reporter from Arirang TV, I've been given this very rare chance to ride along South Korea's first multi-role tanker transport.
At first glance, the KC-330 looks like an ordinary passenger plane. But it is so much more. It's a tanker and supply plane, instrumental in times of war and disaster. This was a plane that brought COVID-19 vaccines to South Korea back in 2021 and delivered emergency supplies to Turkey after its devastating earthquake this year. It's capable of holding some 300 people and 37 metric tons of goods. It can also hold up to 245,000 pounds of fuel and can refuel dozens of combat jets. Once recharged, the jets are good to go for another hour.
Pilots always worry about fuel, but this KC-330 is our military's key asset that relieves us from that stress, so we can maximize our skills and performance, enabling our air response in emergencies.
It uses this boomstick to refuel other fighter jets, and this requires a highly skilled operator to get it just right.
The refueling is done almost in an instant, so I always try to be patient when I'm refueling other jets.
It's these kinds of military assets that can expand South Korea's operations in times of need. Kim Hyun-sung, Arirang News.
In the political arena, preparations are in full swing ahead of a planned launch of a new consular agency to be solely dedicated to taking care of the interests of Koreans overseas. Our National Assembly correspondent Han Sung-woo tells us more.
South Korea will formally announce in the coming days where it will establish its soon-to-be-launched new agency devoted to consular affairs, dealing specifically with the lives and interests of Koreans overseas. After a meeting on Wednesday with the Foreign Ministry at the National Assembly, South Korea's ruling party told reporters it has come greatly close to reaching a consensus on the matter.
We've come to an agreement with the government that the consular agency should be located in an area that meets various standards, including accessibility for Koreans overseas, consistency with government organization, regional association and symbolism, as well as balanced regional development.
The agency, which was an election pledge of President Yoon Suk-yeol, is scheduled to be launched June 5th. But before that, the People Power Party and the government will try to take care of related legal matters as soon as possible by getting the Framework Act on Overseas Koreans passed by the National Assembly.
The Foreign Ministry has devised a mechanism for the employment succession of employees who have been progressing their careers at the Overseas Koreans Foundation.
Several local governments, including the cities of Incheon and Gwangju, have voiced their desire to host the agency. Asked whether factoring in balanced regional development means Seoul will not be chosen as the site, Minister Park avoided a direct response, replying instead that all considerations will be comprehensively taken into account. Han Sung-woo, Arirang News.
And as the world approaches towards post-pandemic era, South Korea's Incheon International Airport is bustling once again with travelers from all over the world. Our Choi Soo-young reports.
After a long and challenging 3 years due to the COVID-19 pandemic, Incheon International Airport is now gradually regaining its vitality. With many restrictions for overseas travelers lifted, the airport has resumed 24-hour operations. Travelers are now able to use the airport freely without wearing masks, and their faces are full of expectation for their trips.
Trip to Korea, yes, it's a nice trip. Yes, people are good looking, and food is delicious.
To cope with the increasing number of visitors, transportation services such as airport buses and taxis for foreign travelers have also returned to operating as normal. According to airport officials, the number of airport bus users in Seoul is 17 times higher than last year. In February alone, over 340,000 people used the airport buses, and there are plans for additional bus routes as the number of passengers continues to surge. Travelers from South Korea's neighbor Japan have been a recent surge after visa restrictions were lifted toward the end of last year.
So this is our first time after the COVID-19 ended, so we are very excited about traveling over here, and we're going to stay almost 5 days, so we're kind of looking forward to our stays in Korea.
Love Korea, 좋아요.
With China increasing international flights from late March, even more travelers could pass through Incheon International Airport in the coming months. Choi Soo-hyung, Arirang News.
South Korea's unmanned lunar orbiter Danuri has sent back photographs of the moon's far side, featuring vivid images of craters. They are the nation's very first images of that side of the moon. Chung Eun-ju has the story.
South Korea's first unmanned lunar orbiter, the Danuri, has sent photos of the moon's far side. The high-definition images were taken during its current mission and were released on Wednesday by the Ministry of Science and ICT and the Korea Aerospace Research Institute. Danuri, which is rotating around the moon 100 kilometers above the surface, took pictures of the Tsiolkovsky crater, a large crater on the back of the moon, on March 22nd. Pictures of the Valles Schrödinger and Szilard M craters were also taken on March 24th. They are the first photos of the moon's far side that South Korea has taken. The lunar orbiter also sent back separate photos of the Vicomin crater taken with its wide-angle polarimetric camera, or PolCam for short. This device is designed to study the moon's surface composition and its volcanic deposits by measuring the degree of polarization. The Science Ministry said the magnetic field meter and gamma-ray spectrometer on Danuri are also obtaining observation data. Danuri entered the lunar orbit on December 27th last year after 145 days of traveling from Earth, and started its operation on February 4th, about a month after test runs. The lunar orbiter is assigned to measure the terrain, magnetic strengths, gamma rays, and other traits of the lunar surface using 6 onboard instruments until the end of this year. The orbiter will also identify potential landing sites for future lunar missions. The Science Ministry said the public can check Danuri's real-time location, along with its photos and collected data, by visiting the orbiter's official website. Chung Eun-ju, Arirang News.
BTS has become the first non-Japanese act to surpass 700 million streams in Japan with their 2020 mega hit single Dynamite. According to Big Hit Music in a press release on Wednesday, the song reached a milestone figure in the latest weekly streaming chart compiled by Oricon. The song Dynamite has also become just the second song ever in the country to reach the latest milestone. Dynamite was released in August 2020 and became the first foreign song to earn a diamond certification from the Recording Industry Association of Japan in February 2022, after surpassing 500 million streams at the time.
Let's take a look at what's going on in the world now. In Ecuador, authorities are on the hunt for around 30 gang members believed to be responsible for the deaths of 9 port workers. According to authorities, the victims were attacked on Tuesday local time while working at a fishing port in the city of Esmeraldas. They were gunned down by heavily armed gang members who arrived by land and sea. It's suspected the port workers were targeted for paying protection money to a rival gang. Gangs in the region commonly force local businesses to pay for protection and threaten to target them if they refuse to comply. Esmeraldas is near the border with Colombia, and gangs often cross the border to avoid security forces. The city has been in a state of emergency since March over rising crime and violence. Turning over to Russia now, which has passed a bill allowing authorities to send military conscription notices electronically. Russia's parliament passed the bill on Wednesday local time, and it is expected to be signed into law by President Vladimir Putin. Russia's military previously delivered call-ups in writing only, meaning people could attempt to dodge the draft by staying away from their homes. But call-ups will now also be put on an online portal and will be considered valid once live. Those who do not comply with the call-up will be barred from leaving Russia, have their driver's license suspended, and face other restrictions. The bill's passage comes amid the ongoing war in Ukraine as Russia prepares for a counter-offensive from Kyiv. Meanwhile, NASA has given the media a sneak peek into a new Mars simulation habitat. Called Mars Dune Alpha, the habitat will be home to 3 missions, each a year long, meant to test humans' physical and mental health while in prolonged isolation. Located in Houston, Texas, the 3D printed facility is comprised of 4 rooms, a medical station, a gym, 2 bathrooms, and a lounge. It also has an outdoor section that is meant to simulate expedition missions on the Red Planet using a special treadmill. The first experiment is slated to start in June this year with 4 volunteers. NASA is in the process of selecting the final candidates. And finally, New York City on Wednesday announced the appointment of its first ever rat czar. Kathleen Corradi was tapped as the city's director of rodent mitigation. She will be responsible for exterminating New York's rats and will coordinate with the departments of health and mental hygiene, parks and recreation, and sanitation. Her goal is to find new ways of cutting off food sources for rats and to find rat populations using new technology. The city also announced that it would spend $3.5 million to create a rat exclusion zone in the city's north. The money will be used to increase inspections, invest in bait and trap equipment, and to harden floors to prevent rat burrowing in public housing. The rodents pose a public health risk as they can contaminate food and spread diseases. Matthew Ashley, Arirang News.
Good afternoon. It's another rough day for younger kids and senior citizens. Yellow dust once again affecting much of the peninsula with dust alerts remain in place, and it's likely to be this way until tomorrow afternoon with rain in the forecast in southern provinces. So please stay inside today. Meanwhile, dry weather alerts have been upgraded and expanded to more regions. East of Gangwon-do province is under a dry weather warning along with strong winds today. Be extra careful with anything that could cause a blaze. Fire safety is more crucial than ever. From a chilly start, highs are rising fast to the 20s, going up 4 to 5 degrees higher than yesterday under sunny skies that are covered with that yellow dust. The temperature differences can be as wide as 15 degrees, so take well care of yourselves. Now, rain starts from Jeju tomorrow morning, spreading to southern regions by the afternoon. That much-needed nationwide rain is in the forecast on Saturday. That's Korea for you, and here's a look at the international weather conditions.
Thank you so much for watching. Have a great rest of the day.